Congressman Thomas Massie from beautiful Kentucky. He is he's pushing the Prime Act. And this, I think, is so huge because I keep seeing headlines still about potential beef shortages. I am a carnivore. And yes, I'll have meat and a salad of bacon. And that's what I will eat. And we've been very concerned about some of the headlines that we've seen about maybe perhaps meat shortages and pricing. And Congressman Massie is working on, he's been promoting the Prime Act, which is going to help small and local meat processors to fill the gap. And we found that to be a huge problem as well. Congressman, welcome to the show. Good to have you. And I'm going to talk about your beautiful background in a moment because I think we have where we're going to go for our bunker if everything falls apart in Texas. But so my husband and I, we purchased a steer. We bought a big, I forget, it's like has a really pretentious name. I don't know, because there's actually now ranchers, we were hearing from ranchers that they actually have a little more than they are used to because of the restaurant demand, everything dropping off due to the lockdown. And then processors are having, we had a huge problem finding processors because not everybody can do it. And then some of them were locked down. So it took like a month, but we finally got it figured out. And our super fat, chunky steer has about a couple weeks more life before he's going to be aged. But it was difficult for us to run down. And we know a lot of this stuff because we hunt, so we have stuff processed. But the people who do not live that life and go shopping in nature, what are they going to do when all of this stuff really starts hitting supermarkets even harder than it is? Tell me about this act.
Well, my wife actually sold half a steer to her hairdresser this week.
I love this.
And I said, wow, your hairdresser bought half a steer? And she said, yeah, and her partner bought the other half. And I said, did you give them any kind of discount? Like, can they afford that much meat? And she said, honey, don't worry. She charges me $130 to do my hair. So we're trading like hair care for steers now. That's what it's come to. But
I love it.
Any case, the backup is at the processors. And four multinational companies control 80% of the meat processing in the United States. Meanwhile, you've got all these small processors, like the ones that are probably going to process your steer, who could pick up the slack, but the regulations on them are the same as the regulations on the big companies. And so it keeps the small processors from expanding, and it also keeps the small processors from starting up. And so my Prime Act stands for Processing Revival Intrastate Meat Exemption. So
makes you think of meat too, just prime meat right there.
By the way, the main sponsor in the Senate is Angus King, Senator Angus King.
You guys planned this. You planned this on purpose.
I did. Senator Rand Paul was willing to introduce it, and I said, I've got a better pick than you, Rand. You're great, but your name doesn't fit the bill. In any case, it is a bipartisan bill. Democrats understand the value of local food and supporting local economies. Republicans are for less regulation and for small businesses. And so this is where we meet. Everybody can agree that we don't want farmers going broke because what's happening right now, Dana, is in the hog industry, they are euthanizing hogs.
Yes, I was reading about this.
Some cases putting them in wood chippers to compost them.
It's like Fargo, but with farming.
Yes, it's terrible. But the problem is, and people are saying, well, why don't you keep the hogs until they get older? Because the hogs, once they get to a certain weight, they start having health issues, and then it's not economical to keep them. And it's also just not humane for the hogs because there are other hogs being born, and you can only fit so many on a farm. So with cattle, we've got a little bit more time before it gets to crisis levels. But the price of beef, because of the processing constraints right now at the big four, the price of beef is going up. The Wendy's ran out of beef here in Kentucky and Ohio.
In Kentucky, they ran out of beef. Well,
and the irony is there are farms like within 10 miles of Wendy's with, hundreds of cattle.
Yeah, you can probably go to a Wendy's in Kentucky while you're looking at a cow on a farm across the highway.
Yes. And they're saying, sorry, we have our chicken nuggets.
Your chicken tendies. There you go. Well, that's not a sufficient substitute at all. What gets me with all of this is that throughout this lockdown, we have really realized how overregulated we are. I mean, it's one thing to say it and say, yes, we have too many regulations, but when it starts affecting your actual dinner and things that you can do in everyday life, I think that is such a great lesson in reducing the size of government. And I hope if there's any silver lining to this lockdown, that's what people walk away with. So with that, is this something that can stay permanent and just be permanent? We'd never have to do this again?
Yes. So, I was talking to Senator Paul about what we would settle for and how we might compromise if we could get this bill through. I'm calling that the Subprime Act if we have to compromise, or maybe Choice or Select Act. We'll have to come up. But the one thing I won't compromise is the permanency of it, because investors and entrepreneurs will not get into the game of processing. They won't expand if they think the opportunity disappears when the threat of the virus goes away. And so even though the virus has called attention to this issue, it's a long-term issue and we need long-term solutions. So we might compromise the bill, we might pass a Subprime Act or a Select Act, but it's got to be permanent in order for people to plan for the future.
I love that, because there's so many processors out there, because we talked to, and by we, I mean my husband, and when he was on the phone with one of them, they were discussing with him some of the regulations that they were up against and why they couldn't just start doing that for folks. And I was shocked, because I guess I just didn't realize how far reaching it was. I could not believe that there were so many processors just around us that wouldn't be able to do it just because of existing law. That's crazy.
Yeah, and by the way, the small processors are backed up now too, because we don't have enough of them. I took 2 cattle to a processor last week, and he's backed up till February of next year. And then the USDA facility that I sometimes use is backed up for over a year. There are facilities that won't book your cattle until 2022.
Yeah, we immediately, we're going to get ours in the next month. We went early. I'm like, I'd rather have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. So I feel like now, since everybody's been home educating, and if schools don't go back this fall as scheduled, I'm thinking that everyone would be really helped nationally if we had just like a course in meat processing for everyone just to try it at home. I mean, that's what it's going to come to. I have to ask you about going from this to some of the other stuff. I have to ask you about what your opinion on a lot of this lawlessness and this whole defund the police rhetoric that we're seeing from Democrats. And they really do own it, because they won't come out and condemn it outright. Even Joe Biden in his statement had a huge caveat. I mean, he essentially supports defunding them with, unless they're able to meet, these requirements that I have. But do people realize what they're actually asking for? And do they also realize what this would do to them in November?
It's ridiculous. It is totally ridiculous. I don't even know Democrats in Kentucky who want to defund the police. So it's the most radical elements that want to do that. And here's the irony. When you have fewer police officers, they have to compensate by using more and greater force and stronger weapons. That's why when you saw the National Guard being deployed, it wasn't because we needed military weapons to deal with the crowd. It's because if you want to have nonviolent responses to the protesters, you need more police present. And so the irony of what they're asking for is it's going to lead to a greater and more lethal force, I think, when the few police that do remain go out there. So, no, don't defund the police, defend the police. And there are a few bad apples in everything. And in Congress, there are a lot of bad apples. But everywhere else, there are only a few bad apples. And the police, by and large, in my district, they're the most pro-Second Amendment. And they know the Constitution. Like most of them are very well versed on that, because, they are the only ones authorized to use force against people, against civilians.
Yeah. I really hope that people rethink that, because I just would hate for that to become a part of the platform for Democrats. And I don't relish saying that would ultimately destroy them in November, because usually those far-reaching, crazy kind of ideas like that have started to become mainstream Democrat ideas, and then they convince their voters of this stuff. And that just to me is a bad recipe. I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing with this Prime Act and your voice and your fight out there on other issues. We're out of time this time, but I know we're going to talk with you again, Congressman Thomas Massie. And by the way, you said before we came on air that this is basically you're not actually on top of a big old hill in Kentucky. That's your gun range. Like that's where you would. Yes. That's pretty awesome.
That's the view from my gun range. It's also the view from my front yard.
God bless America. So
I'm just I don't get good internet service there, so I'm 3 miles from there to broadcast.
You know what? I would actually trade that for that view and being able to shoot in my front yard. So that to me seems like you come out the winner in this one. Congressman, always good to see you. Have a great weekend. Take care.